Hey, welcome to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is 1 p.m. on Monday, February 3rd. We are in the Allen Room. So at this time, is there citizen input for items not on the agenda or public hearing? Is there anybody online with a raised hand interested in speaking at the topic? Okay, so seeing none, first item is Southern Deschutes County Groundwater Monitoring Project results, Department of DEQ. Thanks for joining us. Been a while.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Long history of some of this.
Long history. So I can start off, and I wanted to hit a couple points to make sure I mentioned. So I'll read a little something and then I'll turn it over to Sean. But my name is Greg Sweeland. I work for DEQ in the Bend office. I'm in the Regional Solutions Program, and I was actively involved with the steering committee in their work and their recommendations around this issue. So as part of the statewide groundwater quality monitoring program, DEQ sampled 100 wells, domestic wells in Southern Deschutes County, beginning in spring of 23 and ending 1 year later in spring of 24. Previous sampling events for this area also occurred in 95, 2000, 2001, and then most recently before this last one was 2014. While DEQ samples for a wide range of pollutants, nitrate has been the main concern in the area for decades. And while nitrate itself can cause health effects, nitrate is also seen as a tracer, which is an indication of the possible presence of partially treated wastewater entering the domestic wells. So results detected nitrate in 65 of those wells, and 3 were above the state action level of 7 milligrams per liter. There were 2 exceedances of EPA's maximum contaminant level, or MCL, for nitrate of 10 milligrams, and the highest of those was at 23 milligrams. Well owners were notified of the results last year when they went through quality assurance, quality control, and along with that was a referral to local and state public health resources. A full report on the study will not be published until later this year. And I highlight the release of that report and the analysis because DEQ has not yet received that analysis. We have the raw data. After we have the results from each sampling event, we first prioritize getting that information to residents along with any health implications of that data. And a laboratory analysis report of that information then follows. And in this case, that's probably looking to be about 9 to 12 months away. And that is really helpful for us in kind of contextualizing that data. And it's what we don't have at the moment yet. The region within DEQ is also considering a trend analysis on that data, and basically it would further look at that data in a way to show us and contextualize what it means for the current situation and possibly for longer term trends. There are a lot of groundwater resources that are in great demand right now, both with the water quality, as well as on the water supply with groundwater. And so there's just a lot of research there that we're pressed up against. When DEQ completes the analysis on data, and if we're able to do a trends analysis, DEQ will have more to say about the recent results and what it might mean about the current situation or the future trends. So again, the data, it's a snapshot in time. It's one taken along with several others over the past decade. And meanwhile, while this is happening, there is, groundwater management at the state level is generally getting a lot of attention right now. There's a lot being done, probably legislatively to come around groundwater issues, a variety of those that may or may not play into this issue particularly, but also more robust resources for DEQ's groundwater protection program as well. So the bottom line is that DEQ remains concerned about longer term nitrate contamination in South County. And as has always been the case, some wells are more vulnerable than others, with the shallow wells being the most vulnerable to contamination from shallow septic systems. And I'll turn it over to our on-site manager, Sean Rochette.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. Sean Rochette with DEQ, the statewide on-site program manager based here out of Bend. Also used to be our local variance officer here, so very familiar with South County and some of those issues there. I don't have much to add to what Greg said, you know, the recent sampling event, doesn't really show us anything that we didn't expect. We haven't done that full report or analysis that Greg talked about, so again, we just kind of have raw data at this point. And even, you know, the areas sampled, you know, that's highly variable, like some of the more recent areas we've seen development or variances even. You know, there aren't many wells in those areas, so we wouldn't expect to be able to capture what those effects are. Granted, some of those wells are probably a lot deeper and safer anyways, more protected. So what I can say is that our program is working on a current rulemaking effort. So we're proposing some rule changes. We're in the middle of that now. In fact, next week we have a third Rules Advisory Committee meeting, which Todd Cleveland behind me here is on, and so he's up to date with that. We are looking at changing some of our rules to be more, I guess, consider nitrate more specifically, like allowing specific technologies that are more protective to be utilized. So we're looking at all that to see what we could do with nitrates and how to address those concerns, not just in Southern Deschutes, but statewide.
That rulemaking effort, there was some mention of it in our staff memo. Is that specifically focused on ADU? Like, you know, ADU developments situations, or is it broader than that?
Good question, Commissioner. So the rulemaking, we actually received some legislative funding tied specifically to addressing some sewer availability rulemaking and ADUs. So those are two of the main topics we'll be covering and proposing some rule changes. There's some additional topics on there, changing some language around, like I just mentioned, the nitrates, the variance process. And then we have quite a few housekeeping items that we'll be addressing. But again, the sewer availability and ADU are kind of what sparked this rulemaking.
And when you say sewer availability, what is it exactly does that mean?
So there was a bill that passed in the 23 session that temporarily changed our physical availability definition from 300 feet to 200 feet. That has since sunset at the beginning of this year, so it's reverted back to the 300-foot. But that requested the DEQ look at rulemaking and consider certain factors for when those connections are required, like cost and other things.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the update today. I was definitely looking for a set of well results relative to that historical testing. Seems like we're diverging from you know, a set of wells, as they have one of the maps I brought here. Didn't put it up on the wall, but talks about that 95, 2000, 2014 well results, specific testing wells. And now it sounds like DEQ maybe just started a process of domestic wells, so different wells, so we don't have the history of that now. Does that make sense, or is that what you see?
So there was, I think, 22 wells that have been sampled 4 different times. So there are some wells in the network that going back 2 decades have been sampled now for the 4th time, in one case even 5 times. So is that your question, Commissioner?
Well, yeah, just, yeah, the set that was touched from 95 on, that's all.
Yeah, and then the other thing I would add, it also is that it's a voluntary program, and we kind of take who responds to us and who's interested in getting the testing, and that is largely out of our control, and sometimes it's a struggle to even get 100.
So I would, from my understanding, I thought it was some test wells, so not all just private domestic wells, but other wells in the ground that are known. So I don't know what that testing protocol is, but I would have expected more of the common data from the wells that were tested historically.
Okay, I understand. So this testing was just domestic wells.
So 2013, and I think, yeah, you went to some of these meetings that DEQ published, groundwater protection report for southern Deschutes and northern Klamath. We had the recommendations that were discussed by everybody. So this is the body of people coming to the table 1,000 years ago or 15 years ago, or whatever it was. Goal 11 exception was the first kind of recommendation. Area-wide goal 11 exception. Groundwater monitoring was the next recommendation. Governance, having a sanitary authority in southern Deschutes County. And so I'll say some things, so this is not specifically directed to you, but the big picture with me being in office for a while now. That goal 11 exception kind of matters, it's nice that we think, okay, we're gonna hold on to our land use system and we know how to do it. We're gonna put people in the cities and keep the rural. It was so easy to appeal that, well, if we don't have a water health advisory, we shouldn't go do a goal 11 exception, catch-22. We're trying to stay away from that. And so, I mean, I'd be a strong advocate for that still. And as I say, this is for us as a board of commissioners. Hopefully we can start to have a good discussion and talk about these opportunities here. Because what I've seen is DEQ, you may be in a compromised situation with the resources you have. And you're talking to us today. A lot of people are already emailing us saying, yeah, why aren't you doing something about this, Commissioner? Okay, state land use system puts in this goal 11, the appeal process stops us. DEQ may or may not be there, following with these previous well results. Yes, we know we have a problem in the future, but we're just gonna watch it for 10 years at a time. So I'm very frustrated with it, but I'm not attacking you specifically, but the big picture here is silly. Umatilla is full on panic mode for groundwater problems up there. We could see this coming here. I mean, it's like this slow moving freight train, and we still appeal ourselves and, leadership. We've determined DEQ's taken the lead from 2013.
And DEQ has done the things that it committed to do since 2013. So,
Well, but
What
I mean,
we-
the groundwater monitoring has been a 10-year window slipped a couple years ago. And now we're getting the results that, oh, no, we're not doing the monitoring wells like we did. We're asking for, participants in domestic wells. So we kind of doing a different philosophy here. If we're gonna do groundwater monitoring, let's do it and let's be scientific about it. Let's just say you're in a bad spot. I'm not attacking you directly, but we're not, we're still not getting taken this seriously. So, and just say, I mean, you can correct me. I mean, this is our discussion.
I'm not gonna correct you. I'm gonna say that we have understood this problem for a very long time. We know enough to know that it's not getting better, despite having accomplished some really good things in recent years. Adding hundreds of homes in Lapine on a sewer system. Getting over 1,000 people onto advanced nitrate removing systems. These are all great things. And we also understand that it's not quite enough. And we need to do more.
We're on the same page.
I don't know if we're on the same page because while you want to rant and rave about not being able to use the goal 11 exception, and want to blame somebody else for that, I'd like us to take a serious look at trying again with a more focused area for goal 11 exceptions. This staff report, kind of included the parameters that we were working with back in the. I would say that 180 square mile, 11,000 lots, goal 11 exception area is too big. It's unreasonable and unrealistic. Number one, the land use implications of getting a goal 11 exception that big are profound. And number two, it costs a hell of a lot of money to build a sewer. You cannot hook up 11,000 lots spread between Sun River and Lapine to a sewer system in Sun River, right? This needs to be much more focused so that it can be both economically feasible And be respectful of the state land use planning system. So, yes, I would like to see us try a goal limit exception again and do it right this time.
Yeah, okay, so that sharp attitude right there is inappropriate. So, the way I see it is we just need to tilt the table towards, hey, let's do this together instead of, let's go into the great unknown and hope we're not gonna get appealed. I guess that's the high level statement.
Okay.
Is to
That we
say,
can agree on. We need to work in partnership and we need to, you know, not try to blame everything on the state, not following through on their end.
well, as I say, if I'm a neighborhood, me and my neighbors are like, oh, it's gonna cost a lot of money, this will be hard to do, you know, yes, we know we live in a place that the groundwater could be loaded up 20, 40, 50 years from now, it'd be a bad situation. But why would you even take step one if it isn't a path that's clear in front of you? So that's where I'm coming from. And that's what we saw. Oh, Central Oregon Land Watch threw the flag and they gave us their reasons, and sure enough, the LCD supported it. So then who's supposed to take the lead there? So if we can start again, I'm excited to start again with a lot more information and knowledge. So,
Yeah, and goal 11 exception and building a sewer, which again, like what was being discussed was completely uneconomically feasible. in the
oh
first
yeah,
place.
so,
Um,
well, when you say what's being discussed,
what was being discussed?
but I mean, that's just people's words coming out, sitting around a table. So nobody ever took it.
There
to
was a
point.
goal 11 exception process. That drew a map that was too large,
Okay,
so we can try again.
very good. Well, so when you say you found some wells that were way up above, can you give us some information about that a little bit? I mean, do we have residences that are in trouble, or do we need to act for the health and safety of Southern Deschutes County drinking water?
So there are 3 wells out of the 100 that came up above the state action level, and then 2 of those were above 10 milligrams, which is the EPA MCL. They got resources to county health and to Oregon Health Authority, but beyond that, no.
So then, is that public information, or is that like, well, somebody somewhere had a problem and we're responding to it? Cause I mean, I've been in office for 15 years and I've never got the call, said, Commissioner, this is it, my water's bad, full panic mode, this is it, it just hasn't happened. So I don't know what that means when you say we have action limits and people's wells are bad. And maybe people don't wanna talk about it, you know, if I'm a real estate agent selling a property and a well is tested bad, I don't want anybody to talk about it, so I don't know how to gauge that at this point in time. Cause I've never got that call.
Yeah, all I can say is.
Maybe no more.
We give the data and we say what it means in terms of a health perspective, and then there's resources for them to do what they will. I mean, there is a big onus on homeowners to do their own well testing and, you know, their own. That is an onus that's on them as well, owners to do what they want with that information. Beyond that, at least DEQ, and I can't speak for OHA or local public health, but that is the extent of what we give them.
Well, and so then, as I say, on the flip side to this, I've heard of a few situations indirectly. I mean, I've never been on a property, looked at a wellhead and said, oh, that's the one. But indirectly that they're resolvable situations also. Sometimes it is a new well or fixing the septic system. And it's not a blanket bloom in the whole aquifer in the area. It's a very focused problem.
Well, what we know is that it's coming.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
There's a lens of water where the quality of the water exceeds health standards. That contamination is percolating slowly, farther into the groundwater and approaching where all these well intakes. So we putting these 2023 to 24 results in context, they don't show that overall situation is changing.
I absolutely agree with you.
And so, I mean,
I'm not.
so if you're not hearing from people right now,
Well, I was
Doesn't
asking
mean-
about today's, there's actually,
Okay, doesn't mean we don't need to worry about it.
and I didn't say that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, interesting.
You're-
We're on the
you're-
same page.
You're kind of digging in on kind of,
Well, no, I asked.
nobody's called me about, contamination in their well.
I'm referring to the health hazard right now in a neighbor of mine. I'm not referring to the belief in the 40, 50 year loading pattern. I was just asking about, is there action to be taken today?
And we only know about the wells that are sampled, of course, so there's a lot more out there that weren't sampled.
Yeah.
We do know that there are some areas that are more sensitive than others too, from previous studies that have been done.
Thank you very much. Are you gonna be able to stay for this next one? Because we basically stay on topic, you just won't be at the table.
We will, yep.
Please do.
And I do want to mention that, in the last few days, I've talked to a lot of people at the state about, this situation. And one of them shared with me that there's actually a bill, a legislative concept that is moving in the Senate, the State Senate Natural Resources Committee right now. That essentially tries to better support partnerships between local governments and the state to take action in situations just like this. There's a lot of observations that these GWAMAs, GWAMA, I don't even remember what it stands
It's the
for.
groundwater management area.
Yes, or the GWMAs, yeah. This regulatory hammer, it takes a very long time to reach that threshold. Very few communities have hit that point, and then when they've hit that point, very few of them have made much progress on the situation after the GWAMA was established. So the idea behind this bill is to work upstream, to get ahead of the problem more before we hit that crisis point, which sounds a lot like the moment that we are in right now. So I'm hopeful that, that I heard about there being, more education, more incentives. We can ask for this. I would hope that there would be more focus on monitoring, support for monitoring work. I wish this was a bill that was already available for review that we could take a look at and think about getting behind in terms of support. But it really sounds like it's tailor-made for us.
Yeah, Commissioner, yeah, just one thing on the GWAMAs, and I think that there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I think that's more effective when there's other non-point sources that you can actually do something about. Irrigated ag is one example where there has been some progress. I think this situation doesn't lend itself to that. And the other thing I would say is that, Commissioner, as you said, the linchpin kind of for all of these recommendations was really a county land use process, and all the other supporting documentation for those recommendations largely falls on counties too. There wasn't a lot of state DEQ cutouts for actions in any of the recommendations. They were largely county driven on the assumption that a goal 11 does get approved. And so, we went through 46 public meetings in 3 years. We led 46 public meetings. We are not trying to shy away from getting our hands dirty in this issue. I think that where the state is that we are out of tools, but we still remain a partner on whatever course you want to go. So.
Well, as I say, I mean, if we have legislative support and state guidance on this, action could be possible, neighborhood at a time. And I think of the rural road districts, it's just a natural grouping of properties that are, a neighborhood. The plats, you can go back and figure out, but I mean, we could do this in chunks and pieces. Some of the neighborhoods are truly at the, edge of a drainage towards the river. I mean, we could look at a map and pick some blocks of houses, 100 at a time, 2 or 3 of them, and say, well, let's put a little system there. I've met residents who say, oh yeah, let's set up that, that 40-acre block or that right across the way there in the BLM land that would probably be the disposal area. People think like that down there, but action is not happening. The Crescent Sewer District has been funded by about $5 million, so they got some infrastructure set up there in northern Klamath now, not even in Deschutes County. And I hear they're just absolutely struggling because they're right under the capacity of being able to pay the bill, to operate the system and not be upset at each other trying to keep it flowing. So we, just a little bit more investment it's gonna have to be, because these are already privately owned plotted lands. There's no developer behind it. Everybody owns them already. But a little bit of guidance, and I mean, I'm ready for that. I'll work with whoever. But we can't, why would you raise your hand, stick your head up and say, well, I think we wanna go do this. And then somebody appeals it. It's like, there's just, it has to be a downhill run. It can't be uphill, referring to land use. And, I mean, yeah, if we pick one at a time, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. The perception of what you're saying and I'm saying, it sounds like we're very close. I'm not worried if there was a blanket goal 11 exception, it would still be neighborhood by neighborhood or section by section, and it would have to be designed. It'd be very expensive, but it could be done, and it's soft sandy soil. It's easy to put pipes in down there. It's a shame City of La Pine sewer system was like a 17 or $20 million project. It doubled in cost as it was being built, and that was water and sewer. So it's a shame the cost of construction, right?
And it's also an opportunity. I mean, that is, while back in, at whatever point in time, people thought the real opportunity was to tag on. Tag on with a goal of an exception to the Sun River, to the Sun River wastewater system. Now we have a wastewater system at either end of this area of concern. That can be patched into. By, very small geographic focused areas. If we can try to negotiate groundwater, and try to negotiate a goal 11 exception areas that are reasonable.
Well, as I say, that's, I don't wanna negotiate. Let's just have a hydrogeologist point out where a couple hundred properties would be good to sewer and just go do it. We don't need to negotiate.
What we need to negotiate with? We need to negotiate with the people who are to be served by the district, who are either going to have to pay on the front end for being hooked up, or are going to have to pay on the tail end for the monthly operation of the system, or both. That's who we need to negotiate.
And I'm ready to have those community meetings in my community, in my backyard, and talk through that with everybody, so. We're on the same page again, that's the funny part.
I'm not sure if this is gonna reach to your neighborhood. Like I was looking at a map the other day, I see like real dense pocket right near Sun River, I see some real dense pockets, in the La Pine area, and there's a whole lot of area in between. That I think it's probably pretty unrealistic to pay for the infrastructure to hook up.
But yeah, so you've already looked at the map and you kind of generally have a feel for where priorities should be put.
I have some
I'm just
sense
pointing
of,
that out.
I have some sense of economic feasibility. That's what I've got. That's what I have. I've worked in water resources for 30 years. I have some sense.
So let's
of
use
what-
your expertise and go start moving the ball
I
here.
would be happy to do that.
Well, this is exciting. There's a partnership right here.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, and but to that point, if there are some real opportunities, economically feasible. Saying it economically feasible doesn't mean cheap. These are gonna be really expensive. A really expensive projects to pursue. There is gonna be a whole lot of area that is not served by sewers, where we still need to advance the goal of getting more people onto advanced nitrate removing systems.
And they're in the ground, there's more and more every day, and they seem to be working well.
Yeah, that's a whole lot more cost that needs to be covered. I hear you basically saying you think it's the state land use planning system that's the bottleneck. I'm telling you, I think it is who is gonna pay and how much we're going to have to raise in order to make these things happen.
And we, yeah, and we owe it to all the folks who live in that area to do that.
Commissioner Dare, do you have any thoughts? Thanks for joining us remotely today.
Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts. I've been
Looks like,
listening.
yeah, video's off, but audio's on, so. We'll leave it at that. Well, thank you very much for our passionate discussion today.
She's on now.
Oh, there we go, yeah, yeah,
Okay, well, maybe y'all forgot,
we
but
don't hear you. Maybe we don't have audio today. We
it
do
says,
see you.
okay, it says that it's
Yeah.
working.
Okay, well,
All right, it's not.
text if you need to step in it. Oh, there we go, yeah.
Okay, well, maybe y'all forgot.
We don't hear you.
Right.
Maybe we don't have audio. Watch out, that's,
Okay, it says that it's working.
yeah, watch that.
Is it working? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I was hesitant to say anything because of that loop was going on, but now we're good.
All right, because it says I'm unmuted. Okay, remember I grew up in Hepner where we had the nightmare of all nightmares down in Boardman that went on forever, that was covered up by everyone. And honestly, I would have preferred that they would keep testing the same wells in South County. I think that's, if you're going to do something scientific, let's do something scientific. And I would really hope that just giving someone, you know, a bad report and then maybe a little money, I think we really need to follow up on what's going on, and especially those 3 tests that really came back so high. Like, you're telling me you're going to walk away from that? No, somebody needs to follow up. So I appreciate hearing this report today, but I don't believe we want to ignore it. And I really would like some consistency and the same wells being tested. Let's be real here. And I hope this is geographically all over the whole area. I believe Greg was saying something like, you know, people don't really want to volunteer. Well, this is your water, folks. This is part of keeping yourself healthy. And the more, you know, maybe a group in La Pine could promote this to a greater degree so that more testing is done. But it sounds like we need to get back to those 100. And then beyond that, we've got to keep our county safe.
So, thank you very much, Commissioner Dare. So if there's a scientific well monitoring plan or, you know, a little bit more reproducible over time, I've been in a situation where I would support Deschutes County being a partner in funding that. So I think you may have heard that in the past, because if it's money, let's make sure that's not an obstacle to get good data. And remember, I mean, I'm talking about the 10-year well testing cycle, which was 2 years ago from the last one. So I've been in this spot for a while now. It's like, hey, if we just need to write some money, because we do have, you know, the groundwater protection fund, and we'd like to have this good data. So I don't know if we would like that city, because we've heard that. Oh, yeah, we don't have the resources. You know, we're not sure where we're gonna go with it. Okay, well, and we were gonna pay last time around, so about 12 years ago. And in the end, DEQ ended up saying, oh, no, we've covered the cost of this. Well, we were ready to write a check last time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. Right in here. Item number 2 is Southern Deschutes County Groundwater Protection Program Annual Report. So this is our Deschutes County staff now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and County Commissioners. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director, and joining me is Todd Cleveland, our on-site wastewater manager. Brenda, can I share my screen? Oh, I can, thank you. All right. Do this so infrequently that I need hand holding. See if that, okay, that engages the PowerPoint. So Commissioners, thank you. In your packet today is an annual report of the Southern Deschutes County Groundwater Protection Program. I included a memorandum as well that kind of breaks it down. It's a little bit more of an executive summary. And then I have a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint is really geared to those that maybe here in person or are watching remotely that are unfamiliar with all the efforts that have been undertaken over the last several decades. I just want to recognize it's been snowing this afternoon. I know that Julia Baumgartner was hoping to be here from Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. We talk about partnerships. We have partnerships with COIC. They recently administered a Central Oregon Septic Assistance Program in collaboration with our partners with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We have partnerships with Neighbor Impact, and I just want to stress that those relationships really matter. And we've done some extraordinary work over the last several decades, but there's more work that needs to be done. So I'm going to go through this very short PowerPoint and then open it up to questions. One last remark before I jump in is intermittently over the years, the Community Development Department has offered a kind of an annual or an update on our groundwater protection program. I feel like it's necessary to do this annually, similar to the rural housing profile that Tanya Saltzman, our senior planner, initiated. If nothing else, just to give you updates on any new information about environmental conditions, give you an update on the number of alternative treatment technology, advanced treatment technology systems that have been in place. And, you know, as we hopefully take advantage of new funding opportunities, and I'll talk about one of those in just a second. So this is just an introduction for those, again, who are unfamiliar with this topic. This area in Southern Deschutes County, the Lapine Subbasin, it serves as the primary drinking source for thousands of rural residents that live south of Sun River and outside the city of Lapine. And groundwater investigations by the U.S. Geological Survey and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And this is, you know, this started back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then through the USGS DEQ National Demonstration Project. We got funding from the EPA. We were able to document that this aquifer is vulnerable to nitrogen loading or nitrate loading from on-site wastewater systems. This report is honest about the status of our progress, the challenges that remain relating to protecting this groundwater for this subbasin. And as I mentioned, I think it's going to be important to circle back on an annual basis to talk about what's changed, emerging opportunities, outcomes of ongoing initiatives. On a side note, Greg Sweeland with DEQ, we were involved in several conversations in our attempt to get, and there's still maybe an outside shot of getting some federal funding from the EPA Community Change Grant. But those are the partnerships and the initiatives that we've been pursuing and will continue to pursue in a collaborative.
Mr. Chang, you're nodding your head no, and
Not good. I think it's highly unlikely that will be funded by the program.
Yeah,
And given the state of freezes on federal grant and loan programs that we got a taste of last week. Even if the administration allows the EPA to grant out the remaining funds, I think that would be extremely unreliable funding to start to plan around, speaking about, you want to have certainty before you go forward. That's why I'm shaking my head.
I was just acknowledging
Yeah, that I wouldn't expect anything out of that.
And there are other funding sources that are on the horizon. Christy Bollinger is here, another partner that I'll talk about, in our kind of a slide that encapsulates some of the investments that have been made in the region. And that's attributable to the Newberry neighborhood. But again, this slide is just for those that are unfamiliar with the topic. We have in southern Deschutes County in this Lapine subbasin, very distinctive geology and hydrology. We have a shallow groundwater table. The geology, it's porous in a superficial geologic standpoint. And then we have thousands of platted lots that were created before the state land use system was in effect in the seventies. And so, again, most of our residences in rural Deschutes County, in southern Deschutes County are relying on on-site septic systems and domestic wells that are admittedly shallow. Most are in, in and around 50 to 100 feet, of the aquifer. And this is something that we recognize that the models that the U.S. Geological Survey produced as part of that EPA national demonstration project really underscore that requiring higher treatment standards for existing and future septic systems is critical to protecting the region's aquifer.
Peter, just, that one note
Yeah.
about, I mean, these were platted before the 1973 state land use system. They were rural recreational lots. When
Correct.
they were sold, the vision was that you come in the middle of the summer and maybe spend a week or two on your 1 acre lot coming in from the valley or California somewhere. That's evolved a lot over the years, but as to say, then we put this layer of Oregon land use on there, and technology has changed. If we have high-speed internet and home delivery services, some people can work from home and make money from home. The world has changed a lot here. When we say urban growth boundaries in the state of Oregon and the cities and City of Bend and Redmond and Sisters and Lapine, all the lots are just real small. The biggest house you can put on a small lot. These are 1 acre lots, and they really are a wonderful opportunity for rural living now. And as I say, they're in the sandy soil, which is why the wastewater system drains so well. But it's easy to scratch out and put a pipe in the ground too. So I'm just expanding on the scope of what we're looking at.
Absolutely, and it is true that.
And it does cross into northern Klamath.
Correct, the sub-basin, right, the way the groundwater hydrology works, Todd knows this far better than I do, but it does extend into northern Klamath County, and in fact, the steering committee that Greg mentioned that he helped convene, the DEQ steering committee did, I believe, include some members of Klamath County. It's certainly that steering committee and that report was addressing not just Deschutes County at the border, but Norman.
Well, that's why when I mentioned Gilcrest and Crescent, the Crescent Sewer, I think that's at the bottom edge of that study
Yeah,
area. It's in that same study area.
So this is, again, these are just high points. I think there's a lot to be proud of, and we need to celebrate our successes. We've been at this literally for, almost 30 years now. I'm just listing some of the grant resources at the top there, regional problem solving, from the acquisition of the Newberry neighborhood in southern Deschutes County, which is now served by the EPA National Demonstration Project. All of these elements are documented or described in the annual report, so I'm not going to go into it unless there are questions. We did an innovative transfer development and pollution reduction credit program for a period of time. We provided loans to the Lapine Sewer District to provide sewer in that particular Newberry neighborhood. That was paid off in 2022, but a significant investment to channel some of the growth that we're seeing in southern Deschutes County into an urban environment. Again, federal resources from the federal government, two that are listed: the Groundwater Protection Federal Earmark, the Near Stream Environment Project, which really helped document some of the wetlands that we have, and the groundwater flows intercept some of our wetlands, so you can get some natural attenuation of nitrate. We did a work program talking about high groundwater. Commissioner Chang mentioned the Sun River sewer feasibility study. We helped fund that. We took a loan out from the Department of Environmental Quality to help fund that study to see if it was feasible to extend sewer from Sun River, which at the time was required by the Department of Environmental Quality to update their sewer treatment system. And then a non-conforming loan program with neighbor impact, and that's specifically targeted to those residents that can't get a conventional loan. And in the report, we talk about how many have benefited from that loan program. The alternative treatment technology rebate program, that's been ongoing. We did a wetland study, and then as well, what you can't see, the text box there is we did a goal 11 exception. All of these, this is just a snapshot, and this is a very conservative estimate, but all of these programs represent over $9 million invested in southern Deschutes County to protect the groundwater, and it reflects the partnerships with the Department of Environmental Quality, the hard work that Todd and his team are doing in the on-site wastewater division, and various partners at the state and federal level. This is just some of the accounting that I think is really important to share with everybody. There are over 10,000 lots in the region. Just over 6,900 are developed, 3,400, just over 3,400 are vacant. Of this over 6,900 developed lots, there are almost 5,700 that still rely on conventional septic systems. So there's still a load, a significant load that's being contributed from or by these conventional septic systems. To date, we've put in over 1,200 alternative treatment system technology systems. And by this summer, all indications are we're going to be over 1,300. Todd and his team have approved in collaboration with DEQ with the rules that are in place from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We've approved more ATT systems than any other county, and this trend is only going up. So the work that Todd is doing, and we're very appreciative of the rulemaking efforts that Sean and his team are exploring as it pertains to variances, that pertains to working with service providers for these alternative treatment systems. This program it needs to be modernized, and DEQ is addressing some of those issues.
Can I,
Yes.
before you move on from that,
Sure.
can I just ask? So of these 1,216 systems, how many are retrofits? But people where people have upgraded, and how many are, someone who is creating, a new development, just looking at, this is what's required and moving forward with the requirement.
So I don't know the exact number. And I recall looking at the number of major repairs, which would be systems that have been upgraded in the 200s. So I would assume it's somewhere around 300, because when someone goes through a process to modify or replace their dwelling, that's also a point in time where we upgrade that system. So probably somewhere, 800 new houses, and the rest, 300 or 400 upgrades.
So maybe a quarter.
That's my guess.
So this is, I think this map is really informative. This,
Sorry, Commissioner Adair has right here.
oh, I'm sorry. Sorry,
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Okay, so Todd, I'm just wondering, what about those systems that are actually 95% effective that come from Rhode Island? Has the state ever brought those companies in yet? Because you're doing the systems that's 70% effective, and honestly, we need to have those systems that are 95% effective. Has anything happened with that?
There's a couple of new products that have been listed at the state. The state and the county don't go out and push people to get their system listed. That's up to the manufacturer of that system. And so we only get who is willing to come here. Those new technologies, I have not seen any of those permitted yet. I'm hoping that we will get the companies here to train the installers, to create a distributor. All these factors have to be addressed when a new manufacturer comes in. They have to find distributors, installers, service providers. They have to build the industry up for their product. And so I'm expecting that from a couple of the new technologies that have been listed recently, but I have not seen or heard of them yet. We do have some of the variant systems, which were innovative designs that probably get on the order of 95% reduction if they perform the way they're supposed to.
Thank you, Todd.
So this next slide is showing spatially where these over 1,200 alternative treatment systems are located. One of the aspects of the annual report that you'll see is there's an appendix A, there's a timeline that really describes the journey that all of us have been on. And one of the things I think that's worth pointing out respectfully is in 2009, there was, with support from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, there was an effort to create a local rule that would set performance standards for septic systems, not only for new development, but for existing development. And for the existing development, it had approximately a 15 to 20 year horizon to get conventional systems upgraded to this alternative treatment systems. Anyway, the local rule was overturned by the voters in 2009. And the Board of County Commissioners shortly thereafter, we met with DEQ and residents in Southern Deschutes County. And what we did respectfully, that the board communicated respectfully to the Department of Environmental Quality, is that we had done everything we could. We had done everything that we could at the local level to protect the groundwater. And at that point, we respectfully said, you know, DEQ, we need you to lead the program, and we'll focus on those aspects that are under our purview. And the Department of Environmental Quality recognized that request, they accepted that request, and that's what kicked off their groundwater steering committee. That kicked off our attempt after the steering committee's recommendations, our attempt at getting a goal 11 exception. But the point I'm trying to underscore here with this map is Deschutes County, the Community Development Department specifically, what we're focused on right now is administering the on-site wastewater program and working with DEQ to ensure that when it's appropriate, these alternative treatment systems are utilized for not just new development, but in circumstances where there, you know, the existing septic system needs to be upgraded, maybe due to an addition. But more than anything, our role has changed since 2009, where really Todd's team is responsible for, you know, administering these on-site wastewater rules. The rest of our team is ready to deploy in the event that there's opportunities to pursue a Goal 11 exception, or if there's opportunities to have community dialogue. But we have essentially, you know, we are almost in a collaborative yet supportive role of DEQ, just given what's under our authority. So on the horizon.
Just one more question.
Please.
About those 300 upgrades. So that estimation of 300, that includes all of the systems that have received an incentive from the county? Or is that in addition to?
It would be in addition to, Commissioner. They don't all apply for the rebates. They generally, if they've upgraded a system, they could qualify for a rebate. I don't have the numbers.
Within those 300, does that capture all the people who've gotten an incentive?
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing is with the incentives, you know, basically right now, the county's only kind of motivator, you know, to get people to upgrade systems is this incentive. With that incentive in place, and with requirements that if you want to do a major remodel of some kind, we've achieved 300 upgrades out of 6,000 potential total, which is,
And
I mean,
and there lies the opportunity and the challenge. There's 5,600 existing septic systems that.
And there was 6,000 maybe before these 300, right? So, yeah, 300 out of.
Yeah, and there's 3,000
So-
undeveloped lots that if they come forward, they want to be developed, they will be
They'll be
obligated
required.
to hook onto the ATTs, but it's the 56, close to 5,700 advanced, conventional septic systems that we need to. The sooner that we can incentivize, encourage, compel them to think about modernizing their system, the quicker that we can lessen the load. There is still a load, nitrate load, even with these alternative treatment systems, as Commissioner Adair noted, even with the systems that reduce nitrates by 75%, there's still 25% of that nitrate loading that's going into the ground, which gets to some of these emerging
Yeah,
opportunities.
no, so
Yeah.
where I was going, Peter, was 5% in this period of time. Is not very good. Like, I'm not pinning that on you. I am asking us to reflect on, with the motivators that we have not accomplished very good results, in terms of conversions.
And I think the challenge that we face is it's not an eminent public health hazard. We know it's the US, Todd could speak to this in great depth, but the US Geological Survey models are showing that groundwater moves really slowly in really unusual ways. So the load is it's gonna take time for it to get to the depth of drinking wells. I think USGS predicted, it could happen, if we didn't do anything, and we should celebrate the 1,200 systems that we have. But if we didn't do anything, we could start seeing elevated nitrates in a 30 to 40-year period. But you're right, that without a compelling reason to, motivate property owners to think about treating nitrates differently, it's very difficult to change the status quo, to change the current fact pattern. The one thing that I wanted to acknowledge, obviously, Commissioner Chen, you're correct. The EPA Community Change Grant is that we applied for up to $20 million for investments. That is very unlikely, but there's some legislation that the Board of County Commissioners recently supported, that if funded would offer some resources that could get redirected into southern Deschutes County. I'm glad Christie's here. If I could just get to that second and third point, that we have 2 quadrants in the Newberry neighborhood that are for sale. If one or both sells, we will have significant resources to think about. Significant resources that in the convening of a financial advisory committee could provide direction of how we want to spend literally 7 figures, millions of dollars back into the community. So it's only a matter of time before quadrants 2A and 2D sell. And then the conversation about what's the highest opportunity cost to invest in this region to give us the greatest return. That's going to be a conversation for the board. I would think in the next, 2 to 3 years, we'll be in a position to really look at how we can deploy resources in a targeted way. So this is the last slide that I have, but these land sales do reflect a tremendous opportunity to invest in the community.
And I mean, they might produce, a few tens of millions of dollars, but, my big question is if the incentives we're offering have produced such a, a modest number of upgrades, how much does an incentive actually have to be to motivate someone? Or do we need to think about other kinds of motivations besides incentives?
I don't know that these aren't incentives to upgrade at this point. This is a rebate for when you're required to put in a system that costs $10,000 more than a standard system. So we're not in that incentive to upgrade because you're gonna get $3,500 back scenario. I don't know if we're there. So question, 2008 local rule. In your report, it says ordinance 2008-019 required every property owner in southern Deschutes County. To sell electric services. I understand it was countywide, isn't it?
No, it's just in southern Deschutes County.
So local rule is just that. But then, okay, so then for clarity though, the local rule measure 970 that overturned it was countywide vote.
It was a county, yep, the referendum went to all county voters, it was overturned, and that removed one of the two ordinances that would have required all property owners with an existing septic system to retrofit, by, I wanna say
Yeah,
2022.
Yeah, it
Yep,
was a town, yeah.
exactly.
But as I say, so I mean, it was a countywide vote, city, people inside and outside the city, and it was just acknowledged. So we have been in just kind of limbo land for, taking the next strong step. So the incentive program that's in place is not somebody gonna wake up one day and say, oh, for $3,500, I could put in a $12,000
Yeah,
upgrade.
that's what I was at, that's why I was asking, what would it actually take
Yeah, which
to
is the path
incentivize
forward.
someone?
But yeah, I'm just thinking, we're not in that. I've never heard anybody ask for a rebate if they get motivated to upgrade.
Well, the moment where we're at is that, we haven't made much progress on this problem in decades. So we need to do, more. If we actually want to put a dent in the issue. So, yeah, I'm trying to understand what it actually takes to turn the dial, to move the needle on this. I've heard you say many times, we've studied this problem to death. Why are we gonna do something about it? Okay, this is a problem we have studied for a very long time. We have done a few things. They have been useful.
I don't remember saying stuff like that. Studied it today.
Every time we talk about, forest management, study to death, right? Yeah. Okay, so. Yeah, so I would like us to actually think about, what is going to move the needle, and what it takes for us to get there. Maybe that's something we can agree on.
I got an idea.
So my question, to just run that question to the ground before we move on. What do we think it would take to actually incentivize someone to,
Commissioner, so the original rebate did seem to provide some incentive. What's happened over time is inflation, which we're all very familiar with. The cost of these systems has doubled. Our rebate hasn't changed because we don't have a lot of funding in that. In our groundwater protection funds, we're trying to keep those available for people. If we get an influx of funds from selling the properties, perhaps we can update that amount of money. Instead of being $37.50, it could be changed. That might provide some incentive. One of the things that we did see during the Central Oregon Septic Assistance Program is we did get a lot of inquiries about people upgrading their systems. I think there's quite a few people that maybe have systems that are not functioning perfectly, right? And so they know that they need to do that. It also improves the value of their property and their living condition. So with the loan program, that seemed to also generate assistance. And in conversations with Neighbor Impact, they have a lot of inquiries. So if there was money available to help, cover some of these costs without taking that all, $30,000, $25,000 all at once for the septic system, I think those things would help get these things moving, get the upgrades moving through, get more systems updated. So if we get some financial assistance, perhaps that will help.
so say we were able to offer a $10,000 incentive. If we, in the next few years, we have $3 million in the, out of Newberry neighborhood sales. that gets us. 300, 3,000, 300, 300. 300 is nice.
Right, but it's, right,
It's not that.
it's chipping away, like the EPA Community Change Grant that we applied for would have offered $10 million in coordination with Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council and their contractors. That would have retrofitted 275 properties. So it's expensive, and nonetheless, we're a rare jurisdiction that actually has an asset in the Newberry neighborhood. I mean, there's not just quadrants 2A and 2D, but there's 320 acres, and as the commission knows, in neighborhoods 3 and 4. So, you know, the face value of that, real market value, again, it's not gonna cover the full amount, but you know, there's $30 million in land value over time, and to be able to leverage that with other funding sources gives us a leg up when you compare, you know, our region to say the lower Umatilla County or lower Umatilla Basin. So yeah, we acknowledge this, the purpose of this was just, we're owning our challenges. There's opportunities that present themselves. We have robust partnerships, but we have work that needs to be done. And I think it makes sense to have these difficult conversations, honest conversations on an annual basis as new opportunities arise and as we learn more about the groundwater. And you know, if there is a groundwater monitoring kind of partnership with DEQ to kind of regularly monitor the groundwater, you know, all of this can be folded together in a report that, you know, if nothing else, is educating those in southern Deschutes County about the vulnerability that exists in that region as it pertains to safe drinking water.
A couple ideas here. We have an opportunity for the community to really get engaged in that, the Newberry Regional Partnership, what we heard about in the previous meeting. There's going to be a full-on committee effort for this topic. And we get a bunch of people up to speed and advocating for some exciting things. I got a couple other notes here, kind of just random thoughts. Oregon Water Wonderland Unit 2 is 50% utilized. It's been like that for 15 years. It's been built. There's one whole pivot out there for effluent disposal, or whatever you call it. What is it called when it comes out of a finishing with you?
Land application.
Yeah, or whatever the water is, yeah. So, but there's a full capacity, 50% utilized there. We've already seen ATT system that came out of the city of Lapine that there was pressure for reuse. So I do support the fact that maybe get to a legislative concept for reutilizing the system. It's fiberglass box inside of it. So I know that we ran into a hard wall when someone tried to reuse it already, but an AT&T reuse, because there'll be some systems if sewers go in other places. We have neighborhoods asking for water for fire flows. You know, we're in an area where we're all acknowledging that climate change is attacking us because something, but we want water now. If we do a sewer system, maybe we'll do a water system. Domestic water utilization would probably go way down if we have water system in place. And then another incentive opportunity that we have at Deschutes County, and this is a big one. Hold on, Chris Doty. What if we offer to be a partner in getting some, if we put in a water and sewer system, we're offer to be a partner in getting them, the neighborhood paved and under county maintenance. All of a sudden, we've got a rural neighborhood that has got a lot of things solved. Couple big home run swings in there, but why not? You know, why do we need to think like, oh yeah, we shouldn't be living, feel bad for flushing the toilet? I mean, this is silly sometimes how we do this ourselves. Very expensive, but if we can get folks talking about it in the community, maybe there's opportunity. And not the whole thing. You know, we're talking about a Goal 11 exception for those places that make sense. Obviously, we're in that catch-22 where, well, we shouldn't do it a blanket because I don't know why, but I still don't agree with that. But let's pick a few and try. Commissioner Dare, any thoughts? Well, jump in if you need to. Oh,
Okay,
there you go.
yes, thoughts. Well, we definitely need to be doing a better job, and I feel like the testing hasn't been adequate. And we as county commissioners for Deschutes can't just sit back and hope that the state is going to do what they should be doing. I'm really not sure when we're gonna sell those two quadrants in South County because it doesn't look like, well, the interest rates are still way up there. So that seems to be, as you notice, what is it? Home sales that were already in existence were the lowest in 29 years last year in 2024. So our housing market, that's where nationwide is really, you could say, a bit in the doldrums. And I mean, it would be nice to have that money so that we could improve those systems. And I really think just talking to people, and I would believe that some people would be interested in improving their situation for the good of their community. So more education, perhaps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yeah, no, I would say that the 1,100 plus people who are on ATT systems. The folks inside Sun River, Oregon Water Wonderland. The city of La Pine, who, you know, have spent the money to be on sewer systems. I'm sure none of those people who have made the expenditures themselves to protect against contamination of their wells in the future. Want those 5,600 homes out there to just continue with the systems that they have. We need to do more. I am interested in these, you know, more geographically limited, focused goal 11 exceptions. I think we need to think about what kind of incentives are necessary to actually, you know, motivate people to make the move. And I do think that I don't know what exactly the requirements might look like, but it might actually also be necessary to have some kind of a requirement system in order to get people to, you know, motivate people to do those upgrades as well. Obviously, we tried that with the local rule and there was quite a lot of uproar around that. So maybe it would need to be done in a different way. Maybe it would have to be more surgical. I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that, you know, in situations where you need people to change their behavior, if you offer them technical assistance and incentives, that's good. And then if you have offered the support for people to make changes that are needed, having requirements on top of that can produce even better results. I hope that we can consider those things. We have heard from DEQ that they feel like they've exhausted the tools that they have. It'd be great, you know, through this legislation, this piece of legislation, if we could equip them with some new tools and help to put them in a place where they could fully partner with us on, you know, in this effort, because I know it's a priority for them as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 3. State DLCD Farm and Forest Modernization Project update. So as we were putting, the agenda together, it looked like those were gonna be the two topics, and then more started showing up. It's all land use today.
Yeah, yeah. This might not be quite as exciting as the last topic, but, so for the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner. I'm here to give a teaser, if you will, about what we're working on, in CDD concerning the modernization of the farm and forest program. Just preface this with, this is just meant to be super high level, just letting you know that it is in our pipeline and we're working on it. We will go over all of this stuff in greater detail during the standard work session before the hearing. So we're kind of just diving into it now. We gave you way more information in the memo that I'm going to talk about today. As you're well aware, there's been rulemaking concerning the farm and forest program of the Oregon State Land Use System. These changes have kind of amassed over the last decade for a variety of reasons. Some is just kind of clerical disconnects, some are in relation to case law. Finally, there was rulemaking initiated and adopted on December 6th, and the proposed rules were effective on January 1st. So our task in community development is to turn those many pages of redlined rules into our local code, go through the standard legislative process with the planning commission and the board, and then have that in our code. So everything's a little bit buttoned up and just tidier, essentially. So I'm going to just go over very briefly the topics that are covered. Again, I put actually Peter, who gathered most of the information for this memo. There's a lot more information in the memorandum and to come in the work session, but just to give you a sense of the stuff that's going to be addressed. The first bucket is for codifying case law. So a lot of case law has occurred, common law, based on decisions throughout the state. These are now going to be incorporated into the rulemaking. The first one is concerning the farm impacts test within exclusive farm use zones. The board has discussed this in various scenarios in the past. Basically, the farm impacts test, it requires an applicant to kind of look around and see if there's going to be a significant change in the farm use practices surrounding that property. It's been a little bit loose on how to interpret that and how to administer that. These rules aim to clarify that and create a step-by-step process, so it's a little bit more clear on how to do that. The next topic that we're going to address is the concept of incidental and subordinate and necessary to support as relates to agritourism and events. As explained in the memo, there's a few different levels or 4 different levels of agritourism events ranging in intensity occurring on a farm use property. These require essentially, they want to make sure that the farm use is not superseded by this event or this agritourism. The farm use is still the kind of primary use. The event should be, as they say, incidental and subordinate to the existing farm use of the property. So this it's going to be clarifying that and just putting it in black and white in the code. This has been an issue in a few instances that we've dealt with here, so hopefully that'll be helpful. The next issue is transportation facilities on rural lands. There's a list of transportation uses in the OARs that are subject to the farm impacts test or the forest impacts test, and this will clarify what those are. It's quite a list of exceptions and other uses that relate to things you can do on rural lands relating to transportation improvements. Private parks. As the memo notes, there's a lot of different things that have been considered private parks. Essentially, case law has determined that private parks are meant to be relatively low intensity uses. And so the rulemaking is putting that into place in the language. So that's the first bucket that has to do with recent case law.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, so as we're looking at this overall bundle of rules, my big question is, well, is this going to mean that we do things differently in Deschutes County than we've been doing? And yeah, for this first bucket, I mean, we track case law
Right,
pretty closely. So, I mean, I would guess on these things,
it's giving,
we're most of the way there already.
I believe that's the case, and Will seems to be here to explain more, but it seems like it's going to be giving it more clarity and making it a little bit more black and white.
Hey, good afternoon. Your planning manager, Will Groves. So it's important to remember that these things are already changed in statute and rule, and our constituents are already subject to it. What the situation is, as is so often the case with housekeeping, is that our local implementation of that code is an older version. So a person might in good faith open our code up, this, see what they think they need to do in order to apply for a use, come in and find out that in fact is not the case. So this is really the most basic housekeeping. We have no choices to make here. Rules are already in effect, and we're just putting people on notice in the local codes. So really simple stuff in this one. There's a lot of stuff that's moved over time. And some of it might be of interest to the board, because I know, you don't necessarily watch all this case law. And so Tanya's giving you a little more context. Really, the memo today is that, you of course, set us up at the end of the work plan. Yes. And so we had determined that this was a significant enough mismatch between what people need to do to apply for a use and what it said in our code presently, that it was worth doing kind of a short project to do that housekeeping. So these are expedited projects, minor levels of effort, but it is jumping the line ahead of other things that, that we'd also like to get to, like clear and objective, that Kyle will be talking about next. So this kind of high level orientation is just to let you know that this project's coming, but letting you give us any feedback if you got any concerns or questions about what's happened with case law. But we're in practice, this has already happened.
It's not representing any policy shift per se.
Yeah, I'm tracking that part,
Okay.
but I mean, just in terms of, for this first set, I believe essentially we've been mindful of this existing case law already. And when we talk to applicants about their projects, we're sharing some of this information already. So this first bucket of things, it's not going to be that different.
That's correct. Although there are some for people who maybe had gotten the same approval a year ago, there'd be some real surprises. The farm and forest, the farm impacts test, one of the things when you're doing something in a farm zone that's a conditional use is you have to show that you're not going to mess up farming in the area. And what you're obliged to do, the level of intensity of that analysis has moved significantly. So, it used to be relatively casual. You would do a kind of a windshield survey. When I started here, you do a windshield survey of farms in the area, note that they were all pretty far away and that your house was unlikely to cause a problem with those. And now the level of detail is pretty intense. So even from somebody who applied for 2 years ago, some of these would be a significant change in the effort of the application.
So then as we move through the other buckets, that's going to be that's my overarching question is this really different than what we've been doing? So if you can make any comments about that as you go along.
Sure. And yeah, thank you. And as you said, we've been, tracking case law, and at the same time, some of these come up very rarely. So, it may be that some of these questions get asked once a decade. So, it'll be tricky for planners also because it's not in our code, for planners to remember that these new obligations exist out in state statutes. So to remember that.
That one time that rabbit processing comes up, it would be really.
Yes.
Thanks, Will. So in the second category, these are just administrative changes, and the first one, preparation of products on farmland, essentially corrects a circular definition that made it possible to, where you have to have products or byproducts raised on the farm operation where the preparation occurs. It was kind of some funky language that allowed people, there was essentially a loophole that allowed people to have standalone farm preparation facilities that didn't actually connect to the farm on which it lay. So that's
They were processing things that they didn't grow there.
That's my understanding of it.
And so that won't.
There was no associated farm operation there that they could, that was associated, that was attached to the commercial operation. So that's correcting that, it's buttoning up that definition, because it was a little convoluted.
So for example, now people wouldn't be able to make wine in a place where they were growing grapes or,
Wine, I believe, is a different,
okay.
has a little separate thing. I don't know if this actually has come up in the county, this people taking advantage of this circular reference.
One of the other processing questions I remember coming up was hemp. People who are growing hemp, other people who want to do hemp processing on a different site. Maybe
Right.
it was a different site, maybe they were already growing the hemp there.
Do vaguely remember that. Yeah, this is meant to sort of
So
make
you
that
wouldn't
align
be
better.
allowed to, you wouldn't be allowed to process the hemp in a place that wasn't growing it.
I believe that is the case. Yes, yes. Verification of income for farm dwellings and farm stands in EFU. This one's pretty basic. It's not changing the standard for the verification of income. It's just the methodology. They're saying you have to have this type of IRS receipt. Home occupations in EFU zones. This is cleaning it up so that you can't apply for a home occupation for a use that's more intensive than would otherwise be allowed for that use. So sometimes when, as this memo says, home occupations can range from sales of homes, dealers and events and daycares and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes this requires it to be approved under the standards that are already established for that use under the legislature, rather than going under this sort of more loose standard for just home occupations in general. It keeps it more narrow so that you can't accidentally have a home occupation that's this extremely intensive use that's not intended for that land. It's kind of, but
So if you wanted to do a childcare daycare operation on a EFU zone land property, then you would have to comply with standards around childcare.
exactly,
You could, okay,
yeah,
not just some vague home
exactly,
occupation.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And then the last bucket is mostly real housekeeping stuff. Replacement dwelling requirements, it changed the requirements for replacement dwellings and forest use to mirror the new requirements in another section of the ORS that were previously applicable only to farm zones. And again, we will delve into this as we learn more about it for the work session. The template test in terms of template dwellings in the forest zone, this had a time expiration, so there was a part of the provisions that were only applicable to a certain up until a certain date, so that's striking that. Childcare, adding childcare facilities, preschool recorded programs or school age recorded programs as a new use in EFU zones. Non-conforming schools modifies the requirement for the expansion of certain non-conforming schools zones. Campsites, there was a strange double reference in the ORS that has been fixed. It also addresses some emergency campgrounds and campsites that was previously in the code, and we have now, or we will be now incorporating into our current version.
Sure.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm not looking at
Go
the
ahead.
screen at all. I apologize, Commissioner.
It takes me a while to get back engaged with fighting my fabulous cold. Anyway, Tanya, though, a couple years ago, we did something in Deschutes County to help childcare in, like a conditional use permit or something. Do you recall exactly what did we do in order to bring in more childcare? I know
Believe
it
we
wasn't
did.
a law.
I believe we made it an outright permitted use, right? Where it was previously a conditional use, in those zones. That was that. And I believe there's been some subsequent rulemaking on childcare that is either in the works or just occurred.
That's the, yeah.
But
So, but now, childcare is added
this will
as
be in
as an
EFU.
allowable use in EFU.
Yeah, the text amendment that Commissioner Dare was talking about was separate, yeah,
Yeah,
for residential and
Yeah.
other.
Yeah,
Others.
we went from conditional to outright use in rural, rural
Yeah, and I think it
residential.
was the unincorporated communities and. Okay. Now we Rabbit processing adds rabbit and rabbit products to the list of farm products which may be processed. You never know when it's gonna come up. And then lastly, this is not really applicable to Deschutes County, but farm dwellings in conjunction with cranberry operations. A section of that has been repealed, but that's not really relevant, but it is in the proposed rules or in the adopted rules, excuse me. That's a really quick and dirty summary of what you can expect in the future. The appendix here is actually all of the red lines from the OARs. You can read them if you'd like. That's what we will be translating into our code. And that's what we're beginning to work on right now. So we will come back, we're working on that now. We'll come back with a work session. We'll delve into these with more detail. It'll be an opportunity for the board to ask questions. We will go through a review with the planning commission first, as per our regular procedures. We will not be holding a hearing with them, just a review, which is also permitted by our procedures because this is kind of a done deal, as Will explained. It's we're just in housekeeping, basically. So that's our
This is
plan.
state OARs back here.
Yes.
Then the rabbit processing, it says slaughtering, processing, or selling poultry or poultry products, rabbits or rabbit products. Under the section of rabbit processing.
Yeah. Well, that stuff, but that is actually already in the poultry part is in our code, but so we'll make the modifications as fit. Some of these things are kind of sliced and diced in our own version of the code, so we have to kind of track those bits down. Some of them don't appear in our code at all, like the cranberry stuff. So that's
So this
our
whole
plan.
package is housekeeping, basically,
It's like a specialized housekeeping.
and as the goal to get her done, as in, we're already going and we're trying to button this whole thing up.
We are, Will and I just had a marathon meeting, trying to figure out where all these pieces fit. And we're gonna be working on getting a review by our current planning team and just making sure the code makes sense, then we can proceed. So,
As I say, I mean, so then, I can see the concept here, you know, our state land use system, let's make sure we're real clear, the black and white of the law. Some of the, a great idea, and it's gonna be good for my family to be able to make some dollars here, and we're just closing in sometimes. So it's the political statement of the land use system is a shame sometimes for the private property rights of individuals. And the east and the west are so different. So some of this stuff is west side stuff that the whole rest of the state has to acknowledge, so.
it was interesting looking at the public hearing, the comments that came in, it really ran the gamut. You know, some of that was exactly what you said, you know, and then some appreciated some level of the clarity. It was interesting to look at those comments, so.
Okay, well, yeah. Let's align ourselves best we can as things change.
Let's do it.
And I appreciate some of the things that that were added here. It's allowable uses, rapid processing. The child care.
Yes.
We've had, yeah, rabbit jerky from rabbits that our friend gave us the meat rabbit, and we've done that before.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not delicious.
There's a lot of rabbit cultivation, raising, livestock production
Yeah.
going on in the county.
With that,
Thank you very much.
Rabbit ranching, I don't know.
Rabbit, yeah. Or, and
There's some
rabbit.
sort of Bugs Bunny joke here, but I'm not. Thank you.
Here, yeah, okay. Item number 4, preparation for public hearing, clear and reject the public amendments.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Kyle Collins, Associate Planner.
How's the building going over there? I know everybody was moved around and the
It's
windows are getting done.
still in transit, kind of.
Is it getting close to the, yeah, are you gonna have your own space here at some point soon?
That's
I don't know what your
that's the
status
hope, but I
is,
have no
yeah.
idea when, yeah. Brenda, am I able to share my screen? Do have a presentation because this is technical and unfortunately long-winded, so I'll give you sort of as much of the preamble as I can. This. Bye. So as the chair pointed out, this is a work session in preparation for a public hearing that's February 12th. This is the first of a series of text amendments that we're going to be bringing forward dealing with clear and objective housing standards. So I think all of the commissioners have heard at least some rumblings that this is forthcoming in the background, and this is officially not the start of the process. We've already gone through a planning commission effort, but this is the first time that you'll have seen a slate of these amendments, what that looks like. So I'm going to try to cover this, at least from the background, or just because, again, there is a lot to go over and it is fairly technical. All of the materials associated with the project thus far can be found on the website on the screen.
So, yeah, we were reviewing this for the agenda setting. This is about 3 inches of paper right now.
It's a lot, yeah.
So, the agenda item is a couple pages and the memo associated with it, and I said, if I need to go through it, I bring my laptop, which I didn't bring today, but I chose, not to have it printed.
And hopefully we won't line by line this
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
Obviously, the
Just
commissioners
so
are
we all
welcome to
understand,
ask
it's
specific
3
questions,
inches of paper in this.
but it is quite voluminous, yes. So some general background and overview, just to bring everybody up to speed. This all really started in 2017. The state legislature passed a series of bills with the explicit goal of expanding the production of housing across the entire state. So it was a series of bills, like I said. They generally edited our Oregon revised statutes to limit local governments to only apply clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures that regulate the development of housing, including what they call needed housing. And specifically stated that any adopted standards cannot have the effect of discouraging any needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay. That's really the universe that we're working in here. Initially, yes.
This concept of needed housing,
Undefined, unfortunately.
completely undefined.
Completely undefined. I think our understanding is needed housing is effectively all housing that is currently allowed through the land use. I'll get into some specifics where that doesn't necessarily apply. The resource zones being some of the big exceptions that this effort doesn't apply to. So initially, this clear and objective mandate was only intended to apply to incorporated cities, so those places with acknowledged urban growth boundaries. But in 2023, there was a new House bill that passed, House Bill 3197, and it expanded clear and objective standards to unincorporated communities, non-resource lands, and areas zoned for rural residential exception areas, as defined in the ORS itself. So essentially, that means that from that point forward, this clear and objective set of standards are on the cities, but to rural areas as well, including Deschutes County.
What's the difference between non-resource lands? I think of that as a rural residential exception area and area zone for rural residential uses as defined.
It's just a distinction within the ORS, but for the most part,
It's referenced in 2 places.
correct. So the provisions of this new House bill become effective on July 1st of this year. And once we hit that date, specifically as it applies to housing development. So again, this doesn't apply to things like commercial development, anything outside of residential development. Any discretionary language that's still included in our code that deals with housing development can effectively be challenged by any applicants on the basis that it is no longer clear and objective. We don't know how and where that might actually come up in code, but that is sort of the flashing red light in the corner we're racing against as a part of this process.
Can this, well, so start that again. So it's July 1st.
Correct.
What does the appeal process look like for even getting these in place?
I think in practice,
Yeah.
we don't exactly know,
Yeah.
but generally, I think it is. We have a particular standard in our code that an applicant can make a reasonable argument that it is no longer clear and objective. We would probably send that to a hearings process of some kind. But if it were not clear and objective, the basis of this House bill and previous House bills would essentially say you don't have to meet it. It is not clear and objective, and thus you can apply your own standard, whatever that is. So I'll just give a general overview of what do we even mean by clear and objective standards. It's probably a little bit self-evident, but I think it is easy to kind of get lost in the details here. So we're talking about terms, definitions, and measurements that provide for a consistent interpretation regardless of who's looking at the standard. So there's no need for any type of reviewer to use discretion in applying the standards. can't use language like compatible or adequate, which I'm sure the board has seen in plenty of land use decisions and development reviews over the years. Those types of languages obviously could mean anything depending on who is the reviewer. So those particular pieces of language we're actually removing from the code where applicable. So there's a variety of ways you can do this. You can use things like true false statements. Again, this is pretty self-evident, but it might be a question like, is a particular development in a particular zoning district? That is a yes, no question. And there's a variety of other things that fall into the same category. Next way we could do this is using counts and measurements. So these are specific things like quantitative standards. This is probably the most frequent use of the code that we have in place. You can imagine things like the heights of structures, setbacks associated with any type of development, things of that nature where we have a specific, either a maximum value, a minimum value, or a range of values that we can show on a set of building plans or an application form and review that objectively. And then finally, the last thing is sets of lists and menus. So we might say a particular development needs a certain number of components in order to be approved. It can be anything from the size of a structure. It could be specific ingress and egress points, but essentially we can provide a list. An applicant could choose either all of those, some of those, depending on the specific language associated with the list. And that could also be considered clear and objective. It's relatively easy to say, did you or did you not include these components as a part of your development? So next I'll go into some of the specifics of the current proposal and some of the methodology with how we got there. As you can imagine, we have some pretty significant sections of the Deschutes County Code. Mostly our titles 18 and 19 is what we're dealing with here. Those are our zoning ordinances that don't meet whatever these identified thresholds for clear and objective standards mandated by the state. So we've had to go through the entirety of the code at this point to find language that isn't in compliance with statutes. But as you can imagine, this is a relatively huge package, and this is only the first of likely at least 3, probably more like 5 to 6 of these packages that you'll be seeing over the next couple of months. But we've chosen to kind of break them up, starting with what we'll call the most foundational issues and moving into some slightly more nuanced and potentially more targeted series of text amendments that I'll talk about a little bit about at the end. So this first package is going to cover 3 broad areas. The first are the definitions that we implement throughout the entirety of our zoning ordinances. Things associated with dimensional standards associated with all of our rural residential areas. And then finally, how we deal with accessory structure standards in single family dwellings. So one big note that I'll point out here at the beginning is we've tried to preserve all the existing uses that currently exist in the code. We're obviously modifying a bunch of language, clarifying a bunch of language, but the goal ultimately is not to make policy decisions to inform compliance with this particular House bill. As much as possible, we've attempted to simply change the language to spell out previous ambiguities or add in new language. We haven't removed any existing uses as much as possible. All those remain in place. So now I'll go into some of the specifics of the amendments. So starting with definitions, as you can imagine, this is truly the most foundational portion of our development code. We don't have definitions to point out what we mean when we use certain pieces of terminology. It's essentially meaningless. So this is our Webster's running in the background of both our titles 18 and 19 areas. Unfortunately, numerous portions, numerous terms within our definition section do contain language which is either ambiguous or contradictory in some way. One of the big ones that gets pointed out frequently is what constitutes a family. We obviously use the term single family dwelling quite a bit moving forward, and family does not have an agreed upon definition. It's actually been constitutionally declared illegal to use that particular term, and so that's one of the pieces that we have attempted to eliminate as we move through these definition edits. To address these issues, we've gone through the following methodology for all of our definitions. The first is if there is an existing or a newly included term in our local code that has a reference within the Oregon Revised Statutes, we've either adopted that terminology verbatim or by reference to the statute itself. And the reason for that is we have an understanding with the assistance of our legal counsel, helpfully, that any ORS terminology can supersede the requirements of this clear and objective standard. So if the state has an identified term that they prefer to use, whatever that has to do with, it is not required to be in compliance with this broader clear and objective mandate. The second thing that we've attempted to do is if we have an existing definition that has some subjective language, again, terms like adequate or designed for, things of that nature, where we could replace the ambiguous language with either measurable quantitative standards, then we've added in measurable standards, either within the definition itself or within individual implementing chapters. So potentially like the rural residential zone chapter, how to identify when you can measure these things and what requirements are put in place there. Third criteria, or the third standard that we've used is if we have an existing term which has multiple possible interpretations. So things like what constitutes a cooking area or a kitchen, which depending on, again, the reviewer could have multiple different specific directions on what we mean as Deschutes County and on how to interpret that standard. And again, they've either been included within the definition itself, or if new terms needed to be added to clarify how different definitions interact with each other, we've added in that new terminology as well. The fourth item is if we have two or more existing terms that provided some conflicting interpretations. The most common one is probably we use things like lot width and lot depth sort of interchangeably, but not entirely. Another one is yard versus setback has been a big overlap in our code essentially since its inception. We've simplified those terms into a single term to reduce those unintended conflicts. And then finally, if an existing term has any language which has previously been deemed unconstitutional or otherwise unlawful, the big one that I already brought up is defining dwelling unit based on familial relationships, then we've stricken that language entirely from our code. So outside of those broad methodologies for dealing with definitions, we obviously also have certain terms within the existing code that have already been subject to interpretive challenges over the years. These are things that have been brought up before Deschutes County hearings officers or before the board. One big one that comes up is what exactly constitutes a structure in terms of evaluating development. And where possible, we've attempted to either provide those terms with the broadest possible interpretation, or we've attempted to align the terms themselves with previous hearings officer or board interpretation. So if we have something that we can point to where we've previously relied on those interpretations, we've just attempted to codify that directly to the definitions rather than having to point to these interpretations. As you can imagine, one of the big reasons for the size of your packet today is once we start modifying definitions, we have to go through the entirety of the code to make sure that those new terms align in every place that they appear. So we've essentially having to go line by line through the entirety of the code for every single definition to make sure that one, it still meets the meaning or the standard that was put in place, and add edits where that had been changed unintentionally. That's why you have something like an 800-page packet.
Word has search.
Find function. Yeah, that is a big thing to rely on. It is surprising how many times changing even a single word starts to have cascading effects. And unfortunately, there's not a good way to do this without some good. Particularly as we start to have conversations among our internal departments and what changing certain words might mean if we put new definitions in place.
Well, that's like a big software package though, and it has to compile in the end. You have your references and your definitions and your logic loops and everything, but if it doesn't compile, it's got to fix something, so.
Correct.
And they have the horsepower for that, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is in some
Computing
ways.
power.
Yeah. It is in some ways a little bit like a coding problem.
Yep.
So, that's the first big package. That's by far the largest section of what we're dealing with as part of this first clear and objective text amendment, package. The next that I referenced earlier deals with dimensional standards. There's a lot of overlap with definitions here. But specifically, when we're talking about dimensional standards, we're talking about things which can be categorized through a type of review criteria that needs a specific quantitative measure. These are things like the height of a building, setbacks associated with structure, lot area, coverage, floor area of a particular development. All of those things which have numbers attached, we're calling dimensional standards. But unfortunately, again, we have some language in the DC within our development code, which doesn't deal with some of these dimensional standards in a way that is truly clear and objective, and we've had to correct those.
Are you seeing kind of cultural knowledge across the state for all the jurisdictions? Going down this path together is what I'm thinking.
I would say everybody is running into the same problems. Not everybody is tackling it in quite the same way. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a ton of direction from the state in terms of, we don't have like a model code to adopt in this case. We're effectively been left to our own devices to figure out how to do this. Again, knowing that there's a deadline.
Well, hopefully you have a planner in some other city or county you can call and say, what would you do for this?
And we certainly have, particularly for the cities who've already had to go through this process. There's been a lot of collaboration there, including the city of Bend, that's had to do this for a few years now. To point out some of the specific where this has come up in the past, it's helpful, I think, to use an actual example that comes up quite often when we're reviewing development, which is, how do we review the height of a structure? These are our current definitions. So you can see, here's the height of a building. It's just the vertical distance or grade to the highest point of a roof. And grade in this case is the average finished ground elevations for all walls of a building. Then there's a specific call out for how we deal with grade and landscape management combined. So the problem with that is, how do you determine what the average of the finished ground is? And if you just look at this very simplistic drawing here, you can imagine that, well, if I took 3 measurements at roughly equal distances across the building, maybe that would provide an average of the ground elevation. But the question is, how many measurements do I take to actually find an average? That's not spelled out within our definitions. And this actually gets even more complicated if you imagine something with like a really extreme elevation profile, a lot on some type of weird daylighted basement that's going down a very steep incline. Again, maybe 5 measurements here would be adequate to determine the average elevation, or maybe not. That's effectively been left up to the developers themselves to provide us with that information, and us as individual planners to say, yes, we think that probably meets it. But unfortunately, there isn't some absolute number that we can rely on. And occasionally there are conflicts, even internally amongst individual planners who might have different ways of evaluating something. So to fix this, we've proposed these new definitions. So height has remained mostly the same. It's the vertical distance from the average grade to the highest point of the structure. Grade's the elevation of the ground surface. But the big change in this case is that average grade is just going to be specific for the purposes of calculating the height of a structure. The average of 2 point, which is the highest finished grade abutting a structure, the lowest finished grade abutting the structure. You take those 2 points, you average them together. That will provide you with a ground elevation, and then you take that to the highest point of the structure. That is the height of the structure. So that should be our default method moving forward. However, it's been pointed out to us, and this will come up a little later on when I go to public comments, that there are certain types of development that might be removed as a possibility due to that kind of brute force approach. So we've added in a secondary, what we're calling a discretionary option, which is a perimeter sampling method. So essentially, if you have, let's say, a really complicated structure, a structure with a daylight basement, something to that effect, you can effectively measure the entire perimeter of a structure. That should provide you with one number. You divide that by 8. We've chosen 8 points. Essentially, is just an average 4-sided building. You have 2 per side. Once you've divided that by 8, you take 8 measurement points around the structure, and again, average them together, and that sets your your average grade for measuring to the highest point of a building. Be surprised how often each of those methods come up with different results. The perimeter sampling method tends to be more lenient generally, which is again why we defaulted to the average. The 2-point measurement is normally what we would expect. Most developments would be able to pass through that gate relatively easily, but for those more complicated developments, we did provide this. Section that applicants could still apply for. That's unchanged from our previous version. So again, this is what that would look like in practice. So the standard takeaway is highest, lowest, average, and you measure to the highest point. Perimeter sampling, you're measuring the full perimeter. That gives you an average, and then again, taking that average to measure to the highest point. The two possible options. That's just one potential change that we've taken to deal with a dimensional standard, but I thought it was probably the most illustrative to show a lot of conversations, even to get just to that particular point, both amongst ourselves and in other community development departments. We've included some additional definitions for things like finished grade, existing grade, et cetera. And then we're going to have some specifications dealing with the landscape management zone in a forthcoming package that's dealing with our natural resources, our Goal 5 resources. So that has been left unchanged for the time being. And then the last piece I'll talk about here deals with accessory uses and dwelling uses. So as you can imagine, because these clear and objective standards are required for all residential development, all housing development moving forward, one of the biggest things that we deal with on a day-to-day is the difference between what constitutes a dwelling unit and what constitutes either an accessory structure to that dwelling unit or just a general accessory structure on a particular piece of property. So most zones in Deschutes County only allow the establishment of one dwelling unit on a particular property. That doesn't include things with specific carve-outs like ADUs in certain zones, certain property sizes. But generally you are allotted a single dwelling unit on a particular piece of property. However, pretty challenging to implement certain sections of our code when we're reviewing applications for developments that fall within kind of a definitional gray area between dwelling units and accessory structures. You can think of detached garages or storage buildings or shops. Depending on what components wind up actually getting put into those, they start looking more and more like dwelling units. And it's been quite difficult for us in the past as staff to evaluate these on a fair basis for what might be a perfectly acceptable use and somebody who is quite obviously attempting to build a dwelling unit, but telling us they're building something otherwise. This comes up most commonly when you're talking about accessory structures, which might contain like a full bathroom and laundry facilities. And then maybe there's hookups for kitchen facilities and things of that nature. And generally, when somebody has actually already prepared plans, that forces a lot of difficult conversations with somebody's already expended a bunch of money towards a project, and we have to sometimes break bad news. Sometimes it's negotiation of, well, if you take this out, then you can move forward and not trip these things up. And so to avoid those difficult conversations and again, make our entire code clear from the get-go, we have attempted to limit these uses through either land use decisions in the most extreme cases, but generally what we've requested are what are called restrictive covenant documents. It's basically, you can build this thing that looks like a dwelling unit, but you acknowledge that it will not be used as such unless you go through a formal land use review that would allow you to do that. It's not even so much for the specific current property owner, but mostly when that property changes hands. So a new buyer doesn't purchase a particular piece of property with the expectation that they could use a structure on site as a dwelling, when in fact it was not actually permitted as such and may be unsafe in the most extreme circumstances. So to deal with this through this current amendment package, we've outlined specifically which components, when taken together, constitute a dwelling. So we've taken out all associations with familial relationships and who's actually residing in a dwelling unit. None of that language is included. It's effectively just the components that fall within the structure itself, like a checklist you can imagine of. If you have A, B, and C, then that constitutes a particular dwelling unit. So in this case, it's full bath, one kitchen, at least one kitchen, and all areas have to be accessed internally from each other. So you can imagine if there's like an apartment tacked on to the outside of your dwelling that's not accessible from the interior of the dwelling, that would not be considered a part of the dwelling unit itself. It would have to fall into some other type of designation, either through something like an ADU process, or you would be calling it like a attached garage. And then the second big piece deals with the components associated with accessory structures. So in the same way that we've dealt with dwelling units and calling out a checklist, what things you need for it to constitute a dwelling unit, done the same thing for accessory structures. And we've specifically formalized the process to ensure that any accessory structure built isn't unlawfully converted to or otherwise used for dwelling purposes. So we've called out under which conditions a restrictive covenant is required, and under which conditions a formal land use decision is required. Effectively, what this means is you can have certain components in your accessory structure without any type of review or covenant document. You can have certain components with a restrictive covenant document, again, to alert future landowners that it can't be used as a dwelling unit. And then finally, for more complex things, you can imagine somebody like having an occupation, the second accessory structure, that's been clarified as well. So if you wanted a second kitchen in an accessory unit because you own a baking business, you're continued to allow to do that, but you have to go through a land use review. So that's really as high level as I could get, covering everything that we've done here today.
Do you have a consultant helping with this also, external resources?
Not for this particular portion of it, but for our goal 5, the natural resources, and for our subdivision standards, which are again forthcoming. They're helping us work on those.
Are they doing that now? So in preparation?
Correct. And I believe those are likely gonna show up here in the next few weeks. But this is, given how overarching this is, the first piece that we've had to tackle.
How many pieces are there gonna be total?
We expect at a minimum, probably 3 to 4 and upwards of 6 to 7, depending on how complicated some of them get. I myself am working on another general kind of extension of this first package here. That'll probably be forthcoming in the springtime. And obviously we have our subdivision standards, our Title 17 and Title 12 areas. And our Goal 5 natural resources is another separate package that we're keeping. Those are likely to be the next 2 that you'll see. We haven't received any agency comments on this proposal, the specific package proposal to date. We have received a few public comments, which I'll go through relatively quickly. The first was from Central Oregon Land Watch. They had some concerns around the adoption of a new term that we included in our definitions for incidental and subordinate. We've had challenges over the years trying to specifically identify when a use on site would be incidental or subordinate. That has a lot of overlap with dwelling development in certain cases. And so we included this new particular term. They're concerned, this is the new definition that we've proposed. Their concern was that our proposed definition would conflict with some specific language that comes out of OAR dealing with incidental and subordinate as it relates to the farm use impacts test. Just heard in the previous item, the state requires property owners to go through this incidental and subordinate test generally when you're proposing a certain use that is related to farm use, but is not intended to supersede that. We respected that comment and we think it's correct. And so to address this, we've actually added in some language, which is in your packet today, to both of our definitions chapters, Title 18 and 19, that effectively just says, if there's OAR and OAR definition, cases. So the goal was again to remove that concern, not just for this particular piece of language, but for anything that might have a state term that would apply. The second comment that we had was from Planning Commissioner Matt Cyrus. This followed our public hearing on this proposal with the Planning Commission last month. He requested a specific revision to the proposed grade definitions in Titles 18 and 19. And again, he had a concern that the average grade definition, which we referenced earlier, might prohibitively restrict certain types of structures. He had a particular personal project that he was involved in that had a daylight basement, and they were right on the cusp of exceeding our height limitations in the zone. And he had a fear that that 2-point average grade definition that we proposed would have actually prevented his development. To deal with that, we added in that discretionary alternative, which is now included in the code. Again, the perimeter sampling method, and with the understanding that it would allow those types of maybe more nuanced and complicated structures to move forward. And then finally, we've had some comments from citizen Nunzi Gould. These were all, for the most part, just general comments regarding the necessity of balancing various values, such as the affordability of housing when drafting any type of legislative amendments associated with housing development. She had a desire to evaluate the entire suite of proposed clear and objective housing amendments collectively that are ultimately going to be included in this project. As you can imagine, there is a reason that we as staff chose to break this up into chunks. It would be very difficult to review this comprehensively as one huge package. But she also had a general desire or pointed out that housing should be located inside urban growth boundaries. Staff recognizes all these, they're valid comments. This is unfortunately something that we are required to do as passage of these House bills last in 2023, excuse me, from 3197. So we're on the hook for doing this regardless. And that's hopefully what we're trying to expedite here. So the Planning Commission did already review these amendments. They held a hearing on January 9th. Ultimately, they unanimously voted to recommend approval. Some good discussion during that hearing, if the board is interested. There was an acknowledgement again that this process is required for state law. There's also an understanding that the amendments are intended to be a technical exercise. These, again, aren't intended to be policy decisions about what uses should or should not be allowed in the zone. It's supposed to just be an apples to apples change from the language that we're currently have. Objective that still allows the same uses. And then there was some good discussion around some specific language choices in terms that we included in the definitions, things like kitchen and dwelling unit and how we landed on those particular pieces of terminology. And then, as we already mentioned, we do have some future amendments forthcoming associated with this entire clear and objective project. So this is the first package, but over the coming months, you're going to see, again, some new amendments associated with our subdivision and partition standards, some dealing with our Goal 5 resources, things dealing with cluster and plan developments, and some of our unincorporated communities are going to be tied into that as well. And then we have a bunch of additional sections that are pertinent to the development of housing that just don't come up quite as frequently as these broader definitional statements, accessory structures, things of that nature. So our next steps here, again, you can find all the record materials at that website link. There will be a public hearing next Wednesday on the 12th. You can see my contact information for anybody listening at home if you have questions or want to submit comments on the proposal. That I will take any questions.
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments. One, this package of amendments and the package of amendments that Tanya brought forward are both, it's just great work by the team. They provide really, they provide a lot of clarity from our code, which then of course equals customer service, which is really, really terrific. My question is, now that you're, I mean, very deep into this project with these clear and objective standards, are you able to make an informed decision, provide any information on, will the outcome actually streamline, expedite, and lower the permitting costs for these types of reviews that you're talking about and across the code? I'm curious, maybe you or Will or Peter, whatever you think, but I'm just curious what your perspective is at a global picture now that you're really deep into this.
Yeah, well, that's good. A good point in time to ask that question too.
That's certainly the objective at the state level. I will say, I mean, we've already had in drafting this particular set of amendments, we've already had a lot of conversations with our building safety division, members of our current planning team. And I think the consensus right now, we haven't seen this play out in real time though, is that people should be able to walk into our office, have already looked at our code or look at our code directly and understand exactly what they need if they're proposing something like just a regular dwelling on an R10 property. There's no discussion around the specific parameters, the specific pieces of information that needed to be included in the development proposal itself. So the hope is, yes, it saves time on the front end so that there's not discussions around how to interpret a standard once you actually get to the point that there's a piece of paper on a planner's desk or building safety inspector's desk and they're looking at things.
Commissioners, your planning manager, Will Groves again. I'm real optimistic about Kyle's package here. I think this is gonna help. This is gonna make things quicker and easier and make it easier for planners to tell people what, what obligations they have. This is gonna be a good one. The subsequent ones, particularly the Goal 5 amendment, I think is gonna be tough. A lot of times we say, hey, we'd like a biologist, went to school for this, has years of expertise, maybe even, advanced degrees in this topic to create a property specific habitat plan to protect a particular resource on a particular property. And when you try to turn that into a paint by numbers exercise, that when you can't see the property or maybe even the species in advance and try to build a machine that would produce the same outcomes, that's a lot more daunting. I wonder, my intention as we build these is to always make these things look like the HOV lane, that people are gonna wanna get into it and say, hey, I meet certain requirements. How on freeways, if you got 4 passengers, you get to go faster. So, if you meet all the rules, two, yeah, you got extra passengers, you get to go faster. If it's nice and simple, off you go. And I want to build that so badly. So we're trying to find ways to make sure that this is always an attractive option for people with simpler projects. And at the same time, with people with more complex projects that maybe we didn't imagine, that we're not shutting any lanes that were available to them.
Are there other housekeeping things that are popping up?
Yeah, through this particular package, definitely. I mean, as you sort through kind of the red line edits, which are the bulk of this package, you'll see there's just cleanup of like punctuation errors and language changes just to match all these. I don't know what percentage of that
But
takes
we're
this up,
taking that opportunity and it does.
Yes.
So.
but yes, while
Anything else? No, that's okay. Wonderful. Well, yeah, this is just the point in time, taking kind of the whole code with this requirement, touching it all, so, clear and objective standards seems like something that'll be good, this is good, you confirmed that it will be. But also, thanks for your efforts, thanks for the planning commission to do this, and as I say, I've got a feel for that. The package, I don't know how much of it I'm really gonna read, but this memo is very valuable to put in perspective.
that's fair. And maybe the last point that I'll put to here is I think we're approaching this with a fair amount of. We acknowledge that this is a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, even just this particular package, not to mention the forthcoming ones. The likelihood that we wind up back before the board, let's say in the next 6 months after we've implemented because of some unintended consequences is not zero. So we have some humbleness approaching this, just knowing that if not all the T's are in order, we'll be back.
And I know our code is available kind of in a searchable format on website, is that the tool that's in the back end of this, or is that editable, or there just a Word document, still has to be transitioned?
For the time being, it's just the Word document. Ultimately, once it were to get to an actual adopted ordinance form, if that were the case, then it would be put into our Municode system. And again, it provides that searchable functionality. Of course.
Looks like we're all set.
Thank you, commissioners.
So other items and then executive session today. Want to take a little break at some point?
When we get to executive session, I'm gonna stand up.
That's fine, okay.
Thanks, commissioners. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. I caught a typo before Commissioner Adair did. It's the first sentence on the second page. I called House Bill 3013, House Bill 31. So I'm now handing out, a revised version.
This is a letter, a proposed letter of support for House Bill 3031-1 amendment.
a letter of opposition.
Yeah.
And so,
I was opposing the bill. Got it.
yeah, and so just for context, and there's a lot to unpack here, and I want to be mindful of your time.
So I'm sorry, 3013. I said it backwards too just now.
House Bill 3013, the -1 amendment, and this, so there's a letter for your consideration this afternoon opposing House Bill 3013-1. To my attention and to Stephanie's attention Friday morning, I was attending virtually an Association of Counties meeting, and they brought this legislation to our attention. And we, at the 11th hour, prepared this letter because this morning at 8 AM, there was a public hearing on this legislation. Incidentally, this legislation is stemming from a singular case involving the Aurora Airport, the Department of Aviation, and Marion County. And we don't think this issue rises to statewide significance. And just so you know, the testimony today, Marion County opposes legislation. Prominent land use attorney opposes it. Oregon builders and realtors oppose it. City of Bend is neutral on it, but they acknowledge in their testimony, written testimony, they didn't have enough time to really evaluate the implications. So they want more time to evaluate it. Stephanie is here to really untangle, this gets really legalistic pretty quickly, but as drafted, this amendment to state law allows a local decision, land use permit, zone change, comprehensive plan amendment, development code amendment, what you just heard from Kyle Collins, as it pertains to House Bill 3197. If that local land use decision is appealed to LUBA and or the courts, and it's overturned during the time from the local decision period to the time LUBA and or the courts render it, worst case scenario, they overturn the local decision, a third party who didn't participate in the appeal could go to circuit court and respectfully ask the circuit court to direct Deschutes County or local government to revoke and void the action that was undertaken during this window of time. Maybe they applied for a land use permit. Maybe they applied for a lot line adjustment. Maybe they did some site improvements to prepare their property for a septic system. Under this legislation, local governments would be compelled to basically revoke any land use decision that was tangentially associated with,
If the court supported that.
if they overturned the decision, it was not an acknowledged decision. We think that this incentivizes litigation, and then I'll put this into context. So, for example, the city of Bend, like in Aurora's case, the city of Bend owns and manages an airport that's in our jurisdiction, and they come forward with a master plan to extend the runway. Maybe they want to broaden the locations of the helicopter areas. Maybe they want more places for a hangar. And they submit a master plan under our transportation system plan that's before the board, and the board finds after testimony and the burden of proof that this is all hypothetical. That this is something that they support, and someone challenges it, and it goes to LUBA. It goes to the Court of Appeals, and they go to the Oregon Supreme Court. The litigation, as the board is well aware, can take months, if not sometimes years. And let's say during that period of time from the local decision to the court's determination and ultimate, they find under this hypothetical that we've somehow violated land use law. And let's say the city of Bend was, we want to do some site prep for the runway. We want to deal with a stormwater issue because it's a large acre. We're going to go through DEQ and get a stormwater permit. Under this legislation, if a third party that didn't participate in the proceeding, they could go to circuit court and say, the actions that this entity, in this case, the city of Bend took, directly violates this decision that's been overturned by LUBA and the Court of Appeals. A circuit court could compel us to revoke any action, even if it was unrelated to land use, like a stormwater permit. And so the real problem that we see with this is today, if someone appeals a local land use decision, they have the ability to go to LUBA and make a respectful request. It's called a stay. They could say, we believe that it's not prudent for anybody to act on this local decision, a zone change, a land use permit, anything associated with a comprehensive plan, development code changes. We respectfully asking LUBA to issue a stay so no one can act on the local decision until this issue is resolved at LUBA. That's been in place for decades. We believe it is a useful request that remains available today. And this legislation as contemplated, I have real concerns, and it's so, I didn't time this, but the fact that Kyle Collins was here after the Act of 3197, there's going to be a series of amendments that are coming to the board over the course of the next several months, specifically over eventually pertaining to Goal 5. It's entirely possible, as I noted in the draft letter, that could be litigated. Some people may find that how we tried to, as Will noted, Will Groves, our planning manager, to paint by numbers, that they don't like the way it was painted from a clear and objective standpoint. And they appeal to LUBA and maybe the Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, our residents, our constituents, our builders, our developers are acting under our current code, or maybe they believe they're gonna act on the clear and objective code only to find that we violated it. Someone could come in and say, you cannot allow this clear and objective language because it violates case law. It violates this legislation. Any investment that they made into this property, a vested right, a building permit, a lot line adjustment, anything that's tangential to it, we would be compelled under circuit court to revoke it and put it back to pre-development.
Possibly, I mean, circuit court would have to rule one way or another.
That's my understanding.
Yeah,
That's
So it
all.
just leaves that opportunity.
Was
if
that close?
successful.
Yeah,
Okay,
great,
okay.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just that concept, if you go to circuit court. And then if the circuit court rule, they can go that far.
Yeah, Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. Yeah, I just, I wanna support what Peter just said and kind of add one or two more comments, Peter was just talking about the concept of a stay, which has been part of the law, probably in many, many states, if not maybe even all states, I mean, like, you don't get to halt development unless you're gonna show that, like, hey, we're willing to put that bond down and everything else, because, people act in reliance on their, to use another Supreme Court phrase, investment-backed expectations, and I'm gonna be sounding like really nerdy about, property rights, but really, I think what concerned me, look, I would say the most, but there were several things that concerned me, is that somebody could hang back and not even participate in the permitting decision and, not be a party of record and sandbag and wait. And obviously they're not seeking a stay. And if none of the parties, so people that aren't, that are just moving forward, like, well, nobody sought a stay, it's gonna be up in the courts for several years. And it's a decision that a property owner or developer has to keep in mind, like, they have to accept that.
Take a position on it. And we could go for longer. but I think maybe this is-
Absolutely, yeah, we have other things to talk about too.
This is super complicated, like, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily feel comfortable taking a position on this.
Mhm.
If there's strong support from the other two commissioners, like, I'm not gonna oppose that, but
Yeah.
I
It's a lot to unpack.
I don't
Yeah.
fully understand.
Some of the testimony today was acknowledging that if you think beyond Deschutes County, for a lot of municipalities are really committed and are obligated to address housing. This has a chilling effect in that some jurisdictions will say, you know what? This is gonna be litigated for several years. We'll communicate and say, maybe they preemptively do a stay because they don't want the financial consequences if they get a decision that's reversed. And so this could have, this is the testimony that's been
Yeah.
communicated today, this could have a chilling effect on local governments acting on critical programs that they believe are necessary in their community. Because as Stephanie noted, someone that doesn't participate in an appeal could challenge if their local decision is overturned by LUBA and or the courts, they could go to the court, they could go to.
Commissioner Dare, are you following all this? Are you supportive of signing this letter?
So if this is so significant to all local.
I am,
why-
I'm in support of doing this letter. I did notice that there is a comma after E. Warner Rescue, and it should be a period on the backside. But yeah, like how long is this gonna drag everything on? And I thank Peter for bringing it to us.
And I support getting engaged in this letter also, please, Commissioner Chang.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask why cities haven't gotten more engaged.
Well, I can say, I mean,
Please.
Peter mentioned that the city of Bend took no position, and so, and thank you for forwarding me the link. And basically, they said what you're saying, Commissioner Chang, which is, we don't have enough information, you know, we're concerned about the impact on affordable housing, on needed housing. That was really, it was 3 paragraphs, it was really short and sweet.
My guess, Commissioner, is this hearing was scheduled somewhat unannounced and caught everybody, flat-footed. Because we certainly, didn't identify it on our list of bills. I'm not criticizing the process. There's just a lot of bills out there that are making their way, and so. My guess is that cities haven't had an opportunity to mobilize, and those that have, I mean, Marion County has responded, but the League of Oregon Cities, for example, certainly has not. But the reason why we came here so quickly is the written record period is open for 48 hours, and there's an opportunity to supplement the record if the board so chooses.
So, yeah, I support this letter also. It's quickly moving. Let's get engaged. Deschutes County's at the crossroads, a lot of land use. And you can either sign it or not, but we'll be engaged for, this legislative
Yeah,
process.
I don't think I'm ready to sign this. I'm
Yep,
I'm
understood.
not gonna speak out in opposition.
Well, what about chair's signature, or, I don't know, that's. Just, I'm thinking, let's
I would
get
prefer
engaged,
that you two sign it if you wanna sign it.
that's fine.
So I can work with Brenda and amend the letter for just those 2 signature blocks, correct the punctuation. Seeing Kim Riley, nod her head approval, and then I'll get it to you at the time.
Should we vote on this, or? No, just-
You can, or you can just vote individually. Are you signing it as Deschutes County Board of Commissioners, and then you two both signing?
Yeah.
Then I would just do a motion.
So Commissioner Dare, you want to make a motion for this?
I would be delighted to making a motion that Commissioner DeBonne and I would be signing letter regarding House Bill 3013-1.
So it's moved that 2 of us sign it, so it's a little different, but you support.
I'll abstain.
I'll second.
And I'm going, and I won't sign.
Okay, so just acknowledging it, very open about this. Okay, Commissioner Dare. On the vote.
Yes.
You'll abstain?
Yeah.
And I'll vote yes also. Okay. That worked out.
Great, thank you for your time. Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you, Linda.
I also hope that someone submitting testimony that there's potentially a whole lot of affected parties who have no idea
Yeah.
that this is happening or what it means. That would be a reasonable, that would be a good reason for them to slow down. Maybe hold another hearing.
Other items.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So last Wednesday at the board meeting, the board provided direction to staff to prepare a letter regarding the Spring View Rock. Based on the conversation, I think it was Alsher that was presenting for us. Things that continued to have since then, including a message from Congressman Benshoff, so Commissioner DeBonne, if we could turn it over to you to kind of talk about where we're at and perhaps the need not for a letter at this time.
Sure, it's been a little bit of a rocky road on this one, obviously, or I went out and spent some time with Mr. Shirk and his property. I mentioned, hey, why don't you just put it in writing that why you wouldn't want this to happen, so he did provide that to us. I had it scanned and I sent it to the congressman's office, there's an email response, and this is what Nick's referring to, that says, we are not proceeding with this legislation at this time. In fact, today I let Al Shirk know that too, because he was asking, well, yeah, what's the status? So I was able to give that to him. So basically, this has gone away from the congressman's point of view. So we talked about putting a letter in place. My conclusion is that this thing's kind of got naturally put to bed already.
You forward the email from the congressman's office to us.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Good.
And you did share that with Mr. Schurz?
Yes. Yeah, so I talked to him on the phone and then I emailed it to him today, that specific message from the congressman's office.
Okay.
So another update, Eastern Oregon Counties Association taking a little bit of legislative position stuff here. So this is just a topic for us to understand. So I haven't been involved with this, but support proposal for House Bill 2410. And Umatilla County wants to be a demonstration for exploring small modular nuclear reactors as a source of carbon-free energy. So to say, this is just something that came across at Eastern Oregon Counties Association. Haven't taken a position, but it was just an interesting topic that came across.
And it specifically says demonstration project in Umatilla County.
Well, so Umatilla County is the advocate for it. I'm not sure if the legislation mentions them, but maybe somebody thinks it would go there, so. It just says powering Oregon's community. So yeah, I don't have that information. I think you may have got this email also. East Oregon County Association just broadcasting some of this stuff. Also, House Bill 3173, county fairs has a percentage number that's capped from video lottery dollars, and there's a request, and this keeps coming up, a request that the cap be removed, and it's a percentage, which it was previously. So this is an advocacy position of Eastern Oregon Counties Association, and I did send my signature representing one commissioner in support of this concept. So Bill 3173 is out there. Anything else?
Is that along with Senate Bill 780, which according to what 9 of them were testifying about, we're actually referring to that one with Senator Nash is the sponsor. And it has to do with
Yeah, I haven't kept track of the numbers.
outpatients.
I have not kept track of numbers, but maybe it's the complementary bill.
Okay, I believe it is. So anyway, yes, and they were testifying this morning, so we have to get a letter in within 48 hours. And if there's any way we could have a letter by Wednesday morning in order to sign, that would be great.
Well, so you're asking for Deschutes County to send a letter to board, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But you were just talking about a sign-on letter.
Oh yeah, so the sign-on letter is available at Eastern Oregon County Association, and AOC takes this position also for the House bill. Are you asking for another letter?
Sure. I mean, how many years have we been asking for this? Several. So I would really hope that perhaps this would be the year that we could actually get this accomplished.
Just to recap that, a letter of support for Senate Bill 780 and House Bill 3173 for review at Wednesday's board meeting.
That would be great.
Okay, we'll send a note to Jeff.
Confirm
and
that both of those are.
they're linked together. Yeah.
In case we go two different ways. And then, as I say, I don't usually check my phone during the meetings, but it was Gina Nickel from AOC. It looks like she's leaving a message about recycling, Oregon Recycling Systems Advisory Council, so. I don't know where that's going yet, but that's the only reason I check my phone in the middle of the meeting. Anything else?
Whitney, I think this letter has to be done within 48 hours. So I don't know if the testimony was at 8 a.m., but would that mean that we have to have this like approved immediately Wednesday morning?
Yeah, we'll we can look that up in OLS, but I'm sending Jen a note now and CCing Jeff asking that they work on that.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Is there anything else, any other?
We had the Redmond Managed Camp group meeting on Thursday, and I think we're getting closer to a full bundle of development, and in the first couple of phases in terms of sites at the site, and what can we also do in terms of providing for actual operation of said managed camp. And there's been a whole bunch of ideas. There's been eagerness on the part of the city of Redmond to pin down what the county is going to contribute. I think we're closer to a reasonable package at this point of, what we can afford to both build in this first go round and then operate moving forward. The city is going to try to put some of that into draft agreement. Is it MOU or MOA?
MOU or IGA.
That was an MOU maybe.
Yeah, they're gonna you put some of this into a first draft document and share with us to, as a starting point for discussions about who's gonna do what, who's gonna contribute.
Yeah, the reoccurring cost there will be probably the discussion item, making sure we understand what we're signing up for.
That, and plus also, initially, the city was excited for the county to contribute a very large amount of money to the construction of the site, and I said to them, look, if you're not gonna be putting in operating costs, then we need to think about holding some money back for to actually operate this thing as well as build it. That resulted in kind of a range of options of we could build essentially blocks of like 18 sites. We could either build 4 and spend all our money on capital construction, or we could build 1 or 2 and have funds left over to be able to talk about operations. So I think that's the general direction it's going, but we can, once we have these draft documents from the city of Redmond, we can turn the dials a little bit this way or that way to dial up the number of sites or dial up the amount of operation funding that we're gonna have available. That's a discussion for operations. There at the table, even this last Thursday, there was a range of, oh, we don't really need a site manager, we just need supportive services out there to, I think people would feel a lot safer if there was actually someone out there managing the site, and and how does that combine with having a security presence or patrol, and those two things play off of each other, on-site manager versus, constantly present security guard, one or the other. Still a lot to be discussed.
Anything else? Seeing none, we do go into executive session today.
Oh, I did have one comment. I'd love to have it go into the record. This is a product that I learned that actually helped people with wood at their house in the Palisades fire. And it's from someone who actually tested it. It's called it's from Universal Fire Shield, and it's Fire Coat number 100. He actually used it on wood products by his Mediterranean house, and it actually stopped the wood from burning. You have to put it on every 6 to 7 years. And, it's a new tool in what we can use in the toolbox for, helping people what they have, how they have to make it safer. And of course, I talk to people all weekend long that are incredibly frustrated about the state fire maps. So anyway, I just want to get that into the record. It's Universal Fire Shield and it's called Fire Coat number 100. So if anybody is interested, I'll do some more research on it.
Sounds like a great thing to bring up at, yeah, Project Wildfire.
Yes.
Executive session.
The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 subsection E, which allows the board to meet in order to discuss real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made in executive session. At the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back to the meeting.
To them.
We're out of an executive session. Is there anything else for this meeting? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Yeah. To them.
We're out of an executive session. Is there anything else for this meeting? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Yeah.